Welcome to Ecclesia Principles, a biblical strategy for believers to engage in God's design for government with Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you could join us again today. Today we're going to be continuing in what we've called the balance between self-government and centralization. And yesterday we did some review of last week, and we moved on into dealing with it in a little bit more of a nitty-gritty fashion. We didn't get very far, but the text that I want to use for this is Romans 7:17. And I need to give you a little background to this. This is the part of Scripture where Paul talks about that which I would do, I don't do. And what I don't want to do, I ended up doing that. And he's basically saying that, there's just a lot of dynamics in us that even when we want to do right, we don't always do it. Because ultimately, what we call that is we have a fallen nature. We have a sin nature. Every human being has it. Every human being has it. And Paul in Romans 7:17 puts it this way, but now it is no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. He wasn't saying it wasn't him who sinned, but these desires that were, from his heart, he wants to do good, but he's got these other desires out here that want to do wrong. It's not really coming from him, it's coming from that sin nature. Later on in the same chapter, verse 23, he says, but I see another law in my members. In other words, it was in my flesh. It's in this body here. I have this sin nature. Now, let's apply this, and I'll kind of pick up where we finished talking yesterday about self-government and centralization. That some of us grew up in a time where we could remember, the mom and pop stores. My dad, for a few years, had a old country store. I enjoyed it. I can remember, gas was 26 cents a gallon. I still remember that. And, we had one of those old glass candy counter type of things where, had the sliding doors in the back, but you could see in and see it all. I stole a lot of candy, I'll just put it that way, when he was out pumping that 26-cent gas. But with that, back then there were a lot more mom and pop. Those were self-government. They had their own business. It was theirs. They ran it. It was family government too, if you would. But it was that basic individuality, individualism from that. But today, and you go back a few years, and we started seeing the development of what many call the big box stores. Well, here's the dynamics that largely have been in play in that. Well, in the self-government, with those mom and pop stores, you could get personal service. You could get communication. You could talk to the owner. There were a lot of upsides to that. But all of that came at a price because they couldn't buy at a large volume. It did take more time involved in that. So very frequently prices were somewhat higher. Not necessarily dramatically, but they were somewhat higher. On the flip side, you have the big box stores. They're a machine. They've got distribution centers. They run it through. They've got all these processes. It's centralization. This comes from here. That other stuff comes from this other place over here. Goes into the trailer, and then they ship it out. And all of those things are designed to drive the price down, to make it cheaper. And then especially when you have a time period of economic difficulty, much less just normal life. But if you have a time of economic difficulty, and either it's a time of unemployment, it's a time of great inflation, and this is one of my pet peeves, and it irritates me that nobody's talking about it today. But the biggest thief of the middle class is inflation. Inflation keeps people from being able to advance economically. It actually drives them further down. More people move from middle class downward. The downward push is greater during a time of inflation than at any other time. A bigger gap between the haves and the have-nots increases during a time of inflation, because the bottom line, if you're paying if you're paying $3 for something before the inflation, and then you end up paying $4 for it, well, you have $1 less, but everybody that's buying that extra dollar goes to these folks over here, and so the gap increases more during a time of inflation. But the only time you hear people talking about the rich are getting richer is usually during times of economic increase. And at that point, everybody is increasing. There might be a difference, but there's not as big a difference as during inflation. Inflation hurts the middle class. Inflation hurts the poor more than anything else like that. But especially during these times, the middle class and poor, they have to go for that cheaper product. They have to find a way during layoffs or during inflation. They have to find a way to stretch their budget, because their revenues are not increasing. Their paycheck is not increasing. And so they've got to find a way to make it stretch. Now, the problem is like I said, when this is happening, centralization provides somewhat of a solution. The only problem is it does pull the power towards centralization. And it goes from having an advantage to having an even bigger advantage. It causes that gap to grow even more. And during those times, again, to show that this is really where the problem is, during times of economic difficulty, that's when the mom and pops have the most trouble. Because again, that gap is increasing, and you'll see more mom and pop stores go out of business during a time of economic difficulty than at any other time. Why? Because centralization is providing a solution to the inflation, to the unemployment. It might not be a complete solution, but it's doing something to help that they can't do. So the disparity becomes even greater. Now, here's the problem. Again, Romans 7:17. It's no longer I who do it, but sin that dwells in me. Every person, every human being has a sin nature. It came to us because Adam ate of the tree. He ate of the tree. We have a sin nature in us. We have a desire to do evil. So as this centralization provides a lot of answers, a lot of solutions, keeps prices down, you have more and more power. And don't think that money's not power. Money is one form of power. There's a number of forms of power, but money is one of them. It's one of the easiest to recognize. More and more money is going into this centralization. More and more power is going into fewer hands. The mom and pops, it was spread out. But over here, that same power that was spread out among so many moms and pops is now centralized in the hands of one or two companies, depending on what type of product that you're talking about. And so with that, when you have people that have a sin nature and their power is increasing through this centralization, at that point, it is easy for someone to go, wow, I must be smarter than everyone else. Wow, look at me. Everybody else is struggling. Everybody else is doing this, And me, I'm just, more and more money is coming to me. Now we have trillionaires and companies who are worth trillions. And it's easy for them to begin to think that they weren't the beneficiaries of centralization. No, they were just smart. They're just smarter than all the rest of us. They may have recognized an opportunity before somebody, and I'm not saying that they're not smart, but the level of their wealth is not an indication of their intelligence. Let me say that one more time. The level of their wealth is not an indication of the level of their intelligence. But they can begin to think that because they're smarter than everyone else, they know what everybody else should do. And they begin to exercise the power that has come to them through centralization. They begin to push agendas. That's one of the greatest examples of power not being the result of being smart is Hollywood. There are people out there in Hollywood that because they have a pretty face, because people like them or whatever, and they make all this money, that now they're really smarter than everybody else. No, they could just act better than a lot of people, or were willing to do things that other people weren't willing to do. And now they really know what everyone should do. This centralization can feed that sin nature. And at that point, there can become the idea that, these people over here are not really smart enough to take care of themselves. There's a few of us over here that are so much smarter, and we should just take care of all those people. And so that's a dynamic that you're seeing in our country today, from the wealthy, the business tycoons, the entertainment industry, and even the political realm, where we're doing so much better, and it's obviously because we're so much smarter. We need to take care of these deplorables. We need to take care of these that are not much more than barbarians. We need to actually centralize all this and let us make their decisions for them. In the realm of education, we need to have a small group of people that decide everything for everybody. And parents really, they're not really smart enough to take care of their own children. We need to establish policies that tell them what they have to do, because we're so much smarter than them. You see, what you have happening there, again, is because of advantages of centralization. Power gravitates there. We have to maintain the balance. See, the only way to balance that is to ensure that self-government stays intact, that the jurisdiction of self-government that the Bible lays out, that even our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, that this self-government that is laid out there, that is the only offsetting counterbalance, if you would, to the centralization. We have to protect self-government in order to keep the sin nature that is in everyone from allowing centralization to take over. We have to maintain that balance. God bless you. Join us again tomorrow.